Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. I hope you enjoyed the big game yesterday. Today I'm going to be talking about time series analytics functions and continuous aggregate functions, which are both part of TimescaleDB. And I'm also going to talk about some just basic Postgres functions that are already built in and how you can use them. First of all, thank you to the folks at Timescale for sending me this cool shirt. Appreciate it. It's a pretty cool shirt with the tiger and little clock on it. Not a sponsored video or anything. It's just something that it's nice for a company to do when you're talking about their product. So thank you very much to the folks out there at Timescale that have seen these videos. I appreciate the comments there. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, I'm going to start off pretty basic. I'm going to talk about Postgres aggregate functions, including min, max, average, and sum. These are pretty basic, but also let you do very powerful things. So maybe you want to find high and low volume stocks, so you can look at the min and max volume to find these stocks. So you might want only high volume stocks because you want something that's really liquid, that has a tight bid and ask spread. But maybe you do want low volume stocks for some reason. Maybe you like to pump and dump stocks and move them easily, so maybe you do want low volume stocks. So I'm going to show you how to filter and show stocks that have certain volume characteristics. Secondly, you can calculate total volume in a period. So we downloaded the 5-minute bars, but we can use sum to aggregate these, and maybe you want to show the total volume over the course of a day, over the course of a month, find high volume stocks that way. You also might want to use min and max to find, 52-week high and lows. And since we have these really detailed 5-minute bars, you don't have to just focus on 52-week highs and lows. Maybe you want the 7-week high and low. Maybe you want the 35-minute high and low. And so with min and max functions, you can do that very easily. And with average, obviously you can calculate a moving average. So you want to average the price over some particular time period. So maybe you like the 21-day SMA or the 50-day or the 200-day. And maybe you want to use that to calculate like a moving average crossover to show when a fast moving average is crossing over a slow moving average to detect a change in trend for a particular stock. So this tutorial is going to start out pretty basic, and it's going to use a lot of features that just come with vanilla Postgres out of the box, but then I'm going to dive into some more specific TimescaleDB features. So I'm going to use functions like first, last, histogram, and the time bucketing functionality. So first and last will let you find the first and last value for a particular time period. So in this case, we want the open and close for the day, for instance. And histogram, this will let you divide up our price into discrete buckets. So maybe you want to know how many times Twitter stock closed between 50 and 52, between 52 and 54, and above 54 and below 50. And so this kind of lets us divide up a set of values into discrete buckets. And histograms come up in trading a lot, right? So you have things like the MACD histogram, or you might see a histogram of volume, for instance. Next, I'm going to look at the continuous aggregate functions, including time bucket gap fill, last observation carried forward, and interpolate. So you'll remember in the last video, we used async IO and async PG to download a bunch of 5-minute bar data from Alpaca API, and we loaded that into our Postgres database. Now, while 5-minute candlesticks or 5-minute price bars are very useful to day traders, if you're a swing trader or you're looking at a longer time frame, it's helpful to be able to visualize or analyze that data on other time frames. So, for instance, you might be interested in hourly bars, daily bars, weekly bars, months, years. And instead of having to store all this price data in a bunch of different tables or in a bunch of different formats, we can use this time bucketing function to get these 5-minute bars and kind of expand them out so that we can see what the open, high, low, close are for the hour. So we can get the 12 5-minute bars and put them together into one hourly bar, and this makes it very easy to do that. The other function we have here is time bucket gap fill. And what's nice about that, if you look at some of these low volume stocks that are part of the ARK ETF, you'll see that oftentimes there's price data missing. So if anyone's worked with minute data, you'll see these low volume stocks, you just don't have any data that comes back, and you need to handle these gaps in price data in some way. And so this time bucket gap fill function is useful because you can take the last price that you did have data for, and you can use last observation carried forward. So if it traded at $39.99 at 10 a.m. and you don't have any data till 10:20 a.m., you can just carry that forward. So that 39.99, you can just carry that over using this function and just fill in those gaps if you need to. And then there's interpolate, which we won't really use. Usually you want to just carry over the last value, but interpolate would actually let you fill it, like draw a straight line from the last value you had to, from 10 a.m. to 10:20 and actually interpolate that and draw a line. But you don't want to look forward into the future and like make up price data that's not there. But in other contexts, this interpolate function is very useful. So one nice feature of TimescaleDB is continuous aggregates. And what that allows you to do is, let's say we have over 1 million 5-minute bars, but we want to sometimes just query on hourly bars or the daily time frame, and we can just roll those up into a smaller set of data. So we can pre-compute these views that just function just like a table, and that way when we're running queries on it, it just has a smaller footprint of data to scan. So maybe it'll collapse thousands of rows down to like 100 rows if we want to just look at hourly time frame or daily time frame. And so it just is a way of pre-aggregating and making our execution speed faster when we're querying and performing all these analytics functions. And then finally, I'm going to talk a bit about window functions, including lead, lag, and partition. And this is very useful for comparing a current row or a certain row of data against previous rows. One way that might be useful is you might want to look at all of the stocks that are up and down by a certain percent since yesterday or in the last week. Maybe we want just a report of that. We want to build a UI and say, show me the top movers, which stock moved up or down the most since yesterday or since last week or any arbitrary time period. Or we might want to look at stocks that just sold off during the last hour of trading or spiked in the first hour of trading. And since we have these 5-minute bars, we can run all these lead and lag functions to just compare one bar to the previous bar. And we'll find some useful information that way. And then finally, we'll look at some very specific price patterns with some real world examples. And so there's different stock price patterns we can find, such as your typical bullish engulfing pattern or any pattern that's like in this, the Japanese candlestick book that we looked at. There's a lot of different price patterns in here. And these are very easy to find just using SQL. I realize you can use pandas data frames and other techniques to do this as well, even just plain vanilla Python, but it's kind of cool that you can just use SQL to scan through all this price data really quickly and slice and dice it however you want and just say, find me all the stocks that printed a bullish engulfing pattern, for instance. And then we'll look at some specific stocks here. So I have some specific examples. So earlier in this tutorial, in this series, I talked about Twitter stock. So we'll start just by looking at Twitter stock. We mentioned Cathie Wood adding it to the ARK ETF January 25th or 26th here, and you can see it's done pretty well since then, probably up 20% at least, so it's just run since then. So hope you bought some Twitter stock there. It's at all-time highs now. And then we can look at some patterns like in GameStop, since it's a popular one. We can find cases where a stock is kind of going parabolic like this, so maybe you want to find like 3 large green candles with increasing volume there, and so maybe we could highlight this particular pattern right there, and then we can just query our data to find stocks that are just shooting up quickly like that. And then finally, I'm going to look at this Palantir stock here, and there was this video by Richard Moglen and Ray from Traderline, and they talked about Palantir, this pattern here where it kind of sold off slightly over on 3 bars here. So there's 3 bars where it sold off on declining volume, and then there was this bar here that he highlighted where he called it the wake up bar or the ignite. Some people call it like an igniting bar. So where a stock is kind of selling off on declining volume, and then bam, there's a huge spike in volume, and then this 4th bar, it closes higher than this first bar. And so we'll talk about how to isolate and find that pattern and scan for it in our price data. So that's enough talking about what we're doing conceptually. Let's just do a whirlwind tour of some SQL, and I'll post this SQL on the GitHub page, github.com/hackingthemarkets, and you can follow along and just copy and paste and study, play with this, and show how and see how it all works and tweak it and make it your own. So let's get started with the tutorial. All right, let's go ahead and get warmed up with our SQL. We'll start out with Twitter stock because it came up earlier in the series. you can see this large green bar here. This looks like where old Kathy stepped in and bought Twitter, and we got this nice retest, so it's not like you had to chase it. You were able to still enter the stock at around $48 a share, and looks like it's already up to $58, almost hit $60 a share already. And so let's go into our data. So if you remember last time in the last video, we loaded up this stock price table using our data from Alpaca. We have a stock ID, we have a date time divided into 5-minute bars, and we have the open, high, low, close, and volume for each of those 5-minute bars. And so if we want to find Twitter stock in here, right, we can just do select star from stock where symbol equals Twitter. Like I said, starting off very basic. So we have Twitter stock. It's stock ID 15117. And then we can isolate down and just find all the stock prices. So I can select star from stock price. And let me make that a little bigger for you. Select star from stock price where stock ID equals 15117. Okay. And then you see we have the open, high, low, close for Twitter stock, right? And then we can break this up a little further. And so let's say where stock ID equals 15117 and date of DT, which is our date time. So we're just going to extract the date part of it and see the price bars when it is 2021. Let's see, January 26th is the day that we identified where it was added to that ARC fund. And you see it was trading around $48 a share, but it had that big spike into the end of the day. And then if you look to the present, so if you look at February 5th, for instance, you can see that is much, much higher. So it went to $56 a share as of last Friday. So very easy way to use SQL, isolate stock price data for a particular stock. Now, one thing you'll notice here is that these price bars, I originally had data for pre-market and after-market. And so what I've done here is I ran a query like so, and you can delete from stock price. And I'm deleting, since the market opens at 6:30 over here and closes at 1 p.m. I'm on the West Coast in San Francisco. I went ahead and just cleared out pre-market and after-market data. You don't necessarily have to do that if you don't want to, but I just want to get rid of that extra data because I'm not looking at pre-market and after-market data. However, maybe you have a strategy or some reason you want to look at pre-market data, feel free to do that. So I cleared that out already in advance. The other adjustment I made since we populated prices is I went ahead and added a rounding here. So you'll see, I'll post this in the repository, but I added rounding here. And when I defined the tables here, I set them to do numeric with 2 decimal places. And just so it's nice and simple here. And so if I go back, you'll see there's only 2 decimal places right there. So I just chopped that off. So we've queried for Twitter stock prices on a particular date and looked how it's changed over time. So what do we want to do next? So in my notes here, I have some notes, and I'm going to post this. That way you can run all of these queries after this, because I'm going to go kind of fast here after a while. So what are some other questions we can ask? What was the high and low for Twitter in our database? So we can use a max function, right? So we're going to select the maximum high for Twitter stock, which is 57.44 as of February 5th. And if I want to see the min low, you can see you could have gotten the stock as low as 38.93. Min and max are built-in Postgres aggregate functions. And so we just take all of those rows and collapse them down into a single value, which is the minimum low and the maximum high that we have, right? Going further, we can use the first and last functions of TimescaleDB. And so what I'm going to do here is select the first open from stock price for Twitter for January 26th, so we can see where it opened at, which is 48.13, and when it closed at that day. So if we do the last close, we can run that, and it gives us 56.78. So that's the last close that we have in the database. Okay. So going further, we discussed min-max first and last. Now let's use the sum aggregate function, and let's find some low volume stocks that are held by the ARC ETFs. So I'll copy this in. And what I'm doing here is selecting the stock ID and the symbol. So I'm going to join on the stock table so that I can access the symbol. And I'm going to sum the volume as total volume. Okay, and I'm going to look for the date, January 25th. And I'm going to group by stock ID and symbol so that we can see the stock ID, the symbol, and this sum. And I'm going to order by total volume ascending limit 10. So I'm going to start with the lowest volume and go upward and just show those 10. And I'm going to change this date to February 5th since that's last Friday. And now it's Monday now, so I don't know what any of these stocks have done. So I'm going to run this. And it looks like here are some low volume stocks that we might want to take a look at. So I don't even recognize any of these names, so these might be a little more under the radar, but maybe worth exploring. So you have PTNR here. Let's see what that is. Partner Communications Company. Yeah, very, very thinly traded. You got SILC. Silicom. Yeah, that looks interesting, right? So we got this SILC. Yeah, that looks like a pretty interesting one to look at, actually. I like that pattern. And then ESLT. Yeah, so interesting names here, maybe worth exploring. I haven't done any research on any of these yet. TARO. Yeah, let's see what happens with these. Actually, that looks pretty cool too. All right, so that's a list of low volume stocks, and we use the sum of the total volume and looked at the most recent day. Okay. What other questions might we want to ask? How many times did Twitter stock close below 50, above 52, or anywhere in between? And so this is the histogram function that I mentioned. Okay, and so I can run this. So I'm going to do histogram close. Okay, and then I'm using the numbers 50 and 52, and I'm saying 4 buckets here, and for Twitter stock. And you can see what it does is partition between 50 and 52, and so that'll give us 4 buckets. So between $50 and $50.50, $50.50 and 51, 51 and 51.50, and 51.50 and 52, and then 2 buckets below and above. So below 50 and above 52. And so it looks like there's 4,490 records that are less than 50, and then 170 records that are between 50 and $50.50. So if I were to like select star from price where, or stock price where stock ID equals 15117 and price and close less than 50. Let's see, should I get 4,490? And I'll do a count. Make sure we understand how that works. Yeah, 4,490. And so you can see there's a lot of these count functions that I would run. Just doing this one histogram gives me all that bucketed out into these 6 different compartments, the 4 that I specified, and then the number above and below. Next, time bucketing functions. So I've showed you the 5-minute bars that we've already downloaded. Those records in the database are stored in 5-minute increments. But let's say we're interested in the hourly bars for Twitter stock. I can use this time bucket function. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and paste it in, and I can do select time bucket interval of 1 hour. Okay, and I'll select the first open, the max high, the min low, and the last close. And then I'm going to group by bucket, and you can see instead of the 5-minute bars, I have this chunked up into 12 p.m., 11 a.m., 10 a.m., 9 a.m., 8 a.m. And so we, instead of just all these 5-minute bars for the day, I just have the hourly bars for February 5th. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different hours, right? The market's open for 6.5 hours. And then I have February 4th, February 3rd, and so forth. And then I have the first value, which is the open. And then we have the high, which is the max, and the low, which is the min, and the last, which is the close. And so from those 5-minute bars, we are able to run this query, and now we can see it as hourly bars, and we don't have to store this data, in different time increments. It's just aggregated it for us, right? Likewise, we want something a little more interesting. Maybe we want the 20-minute bars. We're not limited to 1 hour, 1 week. Platforms like TradingView or your platform that you use for charting might limit you to just hourly bars, but maybe you want the 20-minute bars, right? Or maybe you want 1 minute maybe you download 1 minute bars and you want to see the 7 minute, 4 minute crossover, something weird like that, then you can divide it up into 20-minute bars that way and calculate it in whatever way you want to see your data. So this gives you a nice view for your data, however you want to see it. So the next function I mentioned was time bucket gap fill. And so I have this stock ID 7502. And so let's look at this one. Select star from stock price where stock ID equals 7502. And this is a more thinly traded stock here. Let's see what stock that is. Select star from stock where ID equals 7502. Okay. And if I run that, you'll see this is that AYLA, so a pharmaceutical company. And then if we look, that's pretty thinly traded. So if I look at this chart here, you can see there's not a lot of volume. There's a lot of gaps here. So we don't always have price data for all of these different gaps, right? And so if I look at the stock prices there, you'll see it'll probably skip around. So you see how we have 7 a.m. here, but we're 7:05, we're 7:10, right? So we don't have any price data for this time period, right? So we might want to fill in those gaps. So to handle that, I'm going to take this time bucket gap fill and I'm going to give it a 5-minute interval, and I'm going to use this last observation carried forward of the close. Okay, and so I'm going to run this guy, and then you will see here these gaps where I had 1399. It's filled forward, so 1403, 1403, 1403, 1403, and so it's just filling in until we get another piece or another observation here. So you can see how it's just going to take whatever the last value we had is and fill it forward until we get another piece of price data. So that's how you use time bucket gap fill. So the next feature I'm going to show you is continuous aggregates, and it's documented right here on the TimescaleDB page. And what we're doing is creating a materialized view here. And what this describes is the case where you have millions and millions of 5-minute bars, for instance, but maybe you only care about the hourly bars. And so what you can do is create this different view of your data. So what I can do here is run this query, create materialized view, and I'm going to create a view of the data in advance. So I'm going to pre-compute hourly bars. Okay. So I'm going to get this query that I have noted here. Okay, create materialized view hourly bars, and I'm going to create it for the time bucket of 1 hour, and I'm going to get the first open. So the first 5-minute bar, I'll get its open, and that'll be the open for the hour. And I'm going to get the max high and the min low for a particular hour period, and the last close. And let me go ahead and get the volume data as well, so I can do sum volume as volume. So I'll do that. And then, so I'm going to do that for stock price, and I'm just going to group all this data into buckets. Okay. And so if I do that, it succeeded. And now I can do select star from hourly bars. Okay. And when I do that, you see this almost looks just like a table, right? It's a view. And so instead of just doing all these computations on the 1.5 million records I have, right? I have this 122,000 records here. And if I just select the hourly bars for Twitter stock, which is stock ID 15117 in my database, right? I only have to deal with 614 rows, and I can just run all of my queries. And if I want to do all these other aggregates and joins and things, I only need to look at these 600 rows instead of scanning through hundreds of thousands or millions of them, right? And so I've pre-computed the hourly bars in advance, and so those calculations don't need to be run again in advance. Okay, and so, or they don't need to be run in real time. And same way I calculate these hourly bars, I can also calculate daily bars and do this same sum on the volume again. And let me update this so that I can commit it to GitHub. So I'm going to create the daily bars, and I'll do that. And now if I select star from daily bars, right, you'll see that I have October 1st, October 2nd, October 5th, 6th, 7th, excludes the weekends because I don't have price data for the weekends. But you see now that I just have 17,736 daily bars, whereas I have 1.5 million 5-minute bars. And so you can see how I have this smaller table that I can use when I just want to look at the dailies or the hourlies. So those continuous aggregates are very nice there. And so now I can start querying and showing you some queries where I just want to analyze price patterns on the hourly and the daily bars. All right, so now that I have my daily bars and my hourly bars pre-computed, I can run queries just on those. And so let's say I just want my last 21 daily bars. I can just select from daily bars where day is greater than now minus the interval of 21 days. And I just get those daily bars right there that I have data for. This includes some weekends, so there's no data for those. If I want the 20-day moving average, so I can select the average close from, and I can select from daily bars. So let me select the inner, let me run this inner query first so you can see how this works. So I'm going to select star from daily bars, where stock ID equals 15117. Okay, and so these are just going to be the last 20 days I have for Twitter stock. So those are 20 days of Twitter stock, right? And then I can just select the average close from those 20 days. And so if I run this, I get the 20-day moving average of Twitter stock, which is 49.79 for my database that I have up till February 5th, I believe it's what I have here. So that's one way to do a moving average. The other way you can do it, I mentioned window functions. And so a window function here lets me select the day and the average close over a particular set of rows. So I'm going to order by day, and I'm going to do rows between the current row and the preceding 19 rows. And I'm going to select that as SMA 20. And what's nice about this version, instead of selecting a single value, I can get a series of values. And so when I run it like this, you can see the SMA 20 on February 5th was this value. The SMA 20 on February 4th was that value. And so you have the SMA for every single day, right? And so you see my SMA 20 here. If I wanted to plot it for every single day, I have it in this nice series format with this windowing function here. Okay. Going even further, so I wrote some of these queries in advance, so I'm not going to write these all out, but I have a query here that'll show me the highest daily returns. So I'm going to run this, and I'm going to use this lead function and partition by stock. And so what this is doing is actually calculating the amount particular stocks went up on a given day. Okay, so I'm going to run that, and this will just give me some of the top gainers for each day. So February 5th, I have stock ID 9383, went up by 22%. And then let's see, we can have a stock like this 8848 spiked up over 100% on January 7th. So let's see what some of these are. So I'm going to do select star from stock where ID in 8848 and 9383. So these are going to be some of our top movers. So 9383. And let's see what those are. We got 3D systems. So 3D printing is hot again. Kathy's been adding those. And so if I look here, you can see where, yep, as soon as it is added, it went from $11 stock to doubling in a single day in early January. And looks like if you bought that one, up about 500% in about a month here. So wasn't too late at that point. And you see how I know this isn't always going to work, and it seems silly to add just because someone else added, but you see how a lot of the stocks that are added to these ARC ETFs, they're continuing on. So this stock doubled again even after this first double. And 3D printing stocks were actually hot a long time ago too as well. So you see how 3D stocks, I remember in 2013, how it went parabolic as well. And then no one cared. And then all of a sudden, now they do again. And that's ENLV. So this is Enlivex Therapeutics. So ENLV must have had a nice day. Wow, up another 20% today. So the one we isolated was from January, right? So this spiked up earlier and spiked up again. And I don't even have data, but you can see you could have even bought it at the end of last week. And even after this first spike, you got another 20% just today. So I hadn't even looked at this yet today. So even then, another 20% gain there in one day. So it's crazy how these stocks are moving right now. Okay, so highest daily returns. So, strength is leading to more strength at the moment. And so in this particular environment, you see how people are just once a name takes off, people are just piling on and chasing into it. And so, usually I would say don't chase stocks like this. It's usually not a good idea, but you see some of these stocks are just moving like crazy right now. And then next I have the question, what if I want to see the stocks that sold off into the close? So the last 5 minutes of trading. Okay, so I can look at this. So I can run this query. And what I'm going to do is find the ones where the close is less than the previous close, but I'm using just the raw stock price table, which is the 5-minute bars. And this will show me ones that at the very end of the day, like at 1 p.m., right? Or 12:55 to 1 p.m., where they closed below the price that was from 12:50 to 12:55 p.m., right? And so I can run this query, and then you can see a list of stocks here that sold off into the close. And then likewise, you can find stocks that were bought at the open, for instance. And so sometimes you just want to look at the opening of the day. For instance, as I did in the opening range breakout videos, we looked at the first 15 minutes of the day. Here I'm looking at the close of the day. And so I have here in my notes, ADPT is one of these symbols that sold off into the close. And if I pull up the chart here, you can see that is indeed the case. So that's that first stock here, 61.36. And then the previous 5-minute bar was 61.71. And when I pull up the chart here, you can see that's the 61.71 for February 5th. And you see this last 5-minute bar just sold off hard on higher volume than usual. It looks like that happens. That's a pretty frequent occurrence for the stock of it selling off into the close. For whatever reason, make of it what you will. So lead and lag functions I use there to compare one record to the previous record. Okay, and then combining that into more complex queries is we can chain these together to find different patterns in our data. So I have a bullish engulfing pattern that I might want to find. So a bullish engulfing pattern. I've made a whole video on this topic, as you may remember. And this is just a 2-bar pattern where the previous day it closes down. So there's a red candle. So it opens here, closes down. But then the next day it gaps lower. And so the open is below this close, but then it has a powerful move up and closes below the open of the previous day. And so what I've done here is wrote a query to detect that pattern. And so if I select the day, the open, and the close, and I use this lag function, and I find where the previous close is less than the previous open, and the current close is greater than the previous open, and the open is less than the previous close for the last day, then it printed a bullish engulfing pattern. And so if I run this, I can find stocks that had a bullish engulfing pattern on February 5th. And so we can look at some of these. And so I can look, select star from stock where ID in 7249 and 100065. And let's just look at what their charts look like on those days. So I have Agora, which is symbol API, and Fastly, which is symbol FSLY. And so if I look at API stock, okay, Agora, and I'm going to look at the daily time frame. Okay, and look at that. For February 5th, we have this red candle, and there's our bullish engulfing pattern that we detected. And then likewise with Fastly, we should see the same thing. So I'll do Fastly. Okay, and same thing. We got our red candle there, and there's our bullish engulfing pattern. So SQL I'm using to scan a database of stock prices, and I'm looking at the daily bars that we've aggregated in advance, and it's quickly able to find bullish engulfing patterns. Okay, and then GameStop is another example I wanted to look at. So GameStop, we might want to look at this increasing volume and 3 green bars here. So GameStop is actually not part of the ARK funds. Obviously, it's not considered some innovative company, but let's just go ahead and put the stock prices in for a GameStop stock. And so to do that, I'll go to my populate prices, and let me see if I can just hack this in. So I'm going to do stock symbol, I'm just going to replace this variable with GME. And let me see if I can just do select star from stock where symbol, and I'll just do select star from stock where symbol equals GME right there, and just hack this in real quick, and then I'll put it back. So I'm going to run this like that, and let's see, symbol equals GME, oop, extra quote. Okay, run that and see if it finishes. Yep. And then if I do that for GameStop, there you go. I have the stock prices for GameStop. You see the $10 prices, and then you'll see where it goes crazy later on. Yep, 300, 400. Cool. So GameStop stock is in here, and then I have a query. Let's say we want to find a close that closes higher 3 times on higher volume. So we have this giant query here with lag functions where we look at the previous close, the previous volume, the previous close, and the previous volume, and then compare those all together for a particular day. So I'm going to do this. So I run that, and it actually didn't pull up GameStop stock there. And the reason is because I am selecting from the daily bars table, but I didn't cover one thing that's needed in TimescaleDB, and that is refreshing continuous aggregates. And so once you create these aggregates, if you add new price data, you need to refresh these aggregates so that it'll recreate these hourly bars and daily bars for new data that comes in. So look up refresh continuous aggregates, TimescaleDB, and you can manually refresh it, which is what I'm doing, or you can create a job that does it. So you can add this continuous aggregate policy to automatically do this, so you don't have to do it over and over again. But I'm just going to do it manually here. So I'm going to call refresh continuous aggregate. So I'm going to refresh my hourly bars, and I'm going to refresh my daily bars here, so that GameStop will now come up. And yeah, I did that on purpose so that I could show you this concept that of refreshing continuous aggregates. And then now, if I run this, okay, we should get, yeah, so our GameStop will be in here for January 22nd. And which stock is that? 10,382. And if I look at GameStop on January 22nd, you can see the beginnings of this pattern. And I'm going to go to the daily time frame. And then I'm going to look at January 22nd, which is here. So you have the increasing volume and 3 green bars right there. So it's kind of the start of the move of it going from 60 to like 400. And no one could have really predicted it would go that high. But you can see how, that means it's the start of a powerful move. And let's look at some of the other stocks that came up in here. So GameStop wasn't the only one. I could look at in these stocks in here. So I'm going to do select star from stock, where ID in, and I have 9357, 9357, 11597, and 14125. And let's see what these stocks are. Let's see how they did after that move like that. So Eastman Kodak is in there, so that's kind of funny. Kodak stock must have taken off randomly. So if you look at that, what's the story there? Yeah, January 22nd, Kodak also did the same thing. So you can see Kodak stock, for some reason, took off and went up about 30% there as well. And this Silvergate looks like another example. So this Silvergate looks like it did something similar on the increasing volume here. And then you got these 3 green bars, and it looks like this stock went from, like 80 to 150. So yeah, apparently that was a strong momentum move there as well on a stock that doubled. So I don't know the story with Silvergate here, but this stock looks pretty crazy. It went up 10x in a few months here. So yeah, Silvergate, figure out what's up with that. All right, so that's our kind of parabolic blow off top, parabolic move there pattern. And then let's look at this example of Palantir now. So we did a Bullish Engulfing pattern. We did the GameStop pattern. And then let's look at this 3-bar breakout pattern. So I have one more long query here. I know it's kind of long for SQL, so you can decide whether this is useful to you or whether you'd prefer to just use pandas. But it's kind of cool if you have a web app that talks to a database to just pull it out just like this, pre-filtered. So I'm going to run this query. And look at this one. So I'm using these lag functions again, and I'm selecting the close for the day and the volume, and I'm using these lag functions to look at the previous day's close, the previous day's close before that, the previous day's volume, the previous close, the previous volume, all that, and then I'm comparing them to find a stock that 3 bars in a row declined in price, but on declining volume, and then the 4th bar after that exploded in price above the 1st bar, and then had high volume, right? So I'm doing all these comparisons, and if I run this, we can find stocks that had this pattern. And then if you look at the example that I started out with Palantir, this came up for October 6th, where this gray bar is, was that reversal, and you see that Palantir ended up being a nice trade there. It went from like 10 to 30 or so. And so if I look for 2020 October 6th here, stocks that did that, you'll see it isolates and finds stock ID 13161. So select star from stock where ID equals 13161. And indeed, that query returns Palantir. And that small pattern there, that's kind of hard to see. And let me see if I can pull that up here. Right. So if I look at Palantir for October 6th, you can see this declining volume, and then this wake up bar here to pay attention to it, and then it finally breaks out and moves. So that's Palantir there. And we can look at some other stocks that happened to recently. Let's see if there's any other examples. So let's look for February 5th. And I have no idea what it's going to be. So let's do select star from stock, where ID in, and let's look at 6899, 10637, and 11355. And we have ADPT again, HDFC Bank, and JD. And JD is like kind of like Alibaba. It's one of these e-commerce companies in China. I don't know anything about this bank. And we mentioned ADPT earlier. So let's look at this bank stock, HDFC Bank. Yeah, look at that. So we have this stock that's making some moves, right? Yeah, that looks like a pretty strong one. And let's see what it did just today. So this was from, I had data through Friday, and today's Monday night. So HDFC stock, yeah, moved a little bit more. So that might be one to watch. Yeah, look at that. ADPT. Okay. And then JD stock, which is a Chinese e-commerce stock, which has been really trending upwards lately. So this is at all-time highs. So maybe JD, watching the next couple weeks, maybe JD goes to 100 soon. So keep an eye on that as well. So yeah, I hope this all makes sense and all helps. I know I kind of went through it fast and didn't break this down, but we did a good overview of time series analytics functions, Postgres aggregate functions, and we use a lot of SQL to find different price patterns and ideas. And I'm going to commit this code to GitHub. And yeah, you can load up some price data, play around with it, try out TimescaleDB, and check it out. So that's it for now. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you in the next video. Thanks.